Seasonality is incredibly important. And it's obvious if you think about it even for a couple of seconds, right? It's like, when do you want to stock shovels and snow blowers in your store? It's when it's right before snowing season. There's a joke that whenever something in AI gets solved, they call it machine learning. Left my spouse because my AI girlfriend was like better, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, she told me to.
As an employee, you still need to be responsible for or accountable for what comes out of that AI. I've joked that, there are these articles you can read online that says, in the future, you're going to have 10,000 AI coworkers, or, 10,000 AIs are going to, you're going to be the manager of 1,000 AIs. The problem is, I can't fire any of those AIs. I can't put those AIs on a performance plan or a coaching plan.
You're listening to the Transformed with Data podcast with Graham Crawford, CEO of Crawford McMillan. Graham is here to share something he's genuinely passionate about. He's going to show you how data can completely change the outcome for both people and businesses. In each episode, he sits down with real people who've done incredible things with data. But don't worry, these aren't your typical dry case studies. Graham and his guests bring you stories about leaders and innovators who saw something in their data that sparked a brand new reality. These are changes that tore through entire industries, upended company cultures, and sometimes even changed lives. So whether you're a data enthusiast or just curious about how to find the truth in your data, join Graham as he discovers how data becomes more than just numbers. It becomes the spark that ignites real, meaningful change. Let's get started. Thanks for listening.
Most AI and machine learning projects don't fail because the models are bad. They fail because no one connects math to the messy reality of human behavior. Scott Golder has spent his career fixing that disconnect. He's a sociologist by training, now senior director of data science at the Home Depot, where his team powers the algorithms behind one of the world's top 5 e-commerce platforms. Before that, he helped scale data science at Capital One. In this episode, Scott breaks down how to build data teams that blend academic depth with real-world traction, and what it really takes to make machine learning and AI trustworthy at scale. So let's get into it. Here's Scott Golder. Welcome, Scott. Thank you so much for coming on.
Graham, thank you so much for having me.
Home Depot really is one of the top 5 e-commerce platforms. There's so many questions I could ask about it, but I want to start with your background and this blend of academia with business results. How do you come up with the right blend of academic curiosity and business reality when you're putting data science teams together?
Yeah, it took me a long time to realize this, frankly, but I've observed that the deeper the academic background, maybe not the better fit as a data scientist. So I have been privileged to work with a very large number of data scientists over time who have a wide range of academic backgrounds. And that's not just the disciplines that they've been trained in, but really how long they have spent in
Right.
their academic careers. So some people have finished their undergrad and had a whole bunch of professional experience, and they're amazing data scientists. Typically, what I see is people have some sort of master's in a technical discipline. And then, of course, there are people who have spent years getting PhDs in wide varieties of disciplines. So you mentioned earlier, I'm a sociologist, and my background before that was actually in linguistics and computer science, which, well, the linguistics part of it is mostly good for, boring cocktail party conversations and stuff like that at this point. But I've seen data scientists have, more traditional backgrounds in statistics and computer science and things like that, a lot of physics, a lot of biology. I joke I have had people on my teams who are literally former rocket scientists,
Wow.
and just wide varieties of different kinds of backgrounds, which is great because the conversations you can have at lunch together are terrific. And you always tend to learn something new from those people. But one of the things I have observed, maybe this is very data scientist of me, is there is not a statistical relationship between whether someone, say, has a PhD and is a great data scientist. In both of the companies that I've been part of in the past decade, I've taken my performance management data and the one binary variable, right, of, PhD, non-PhD, to try to see if there's a statistically significant difference in performance between PhDs and non-PhDs. And I found it not to be the case. The null hypothesis there, right, that difference between those two groups is zero, turns out to be supported. And what I do think matters, and this is why I think it, can be anti-correlated in some cases, is simply put, you have to fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And I have observed that people with great methodological depth will sometimes fall in love with their methodologies.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
yeah, maybe that approach that you took is not the right approach. And this is why having a diverse team in terms of their disciplinary backgrounds is really important, right? It's because people can recommend lots of different methodologies to attack the same kind of problem, but you have to love the problem. That means learning everything that you can about the problem. That means spending time with your business partner. That's cliche, right? Spend time with your business partner, but it's not just talking to them. I think it's great when you can shadow them, right?
Right.
So I love when data scientists sit next to the people who are part of the business team that they're working with and look at the documents that they're creating, look at the phone calls they're on, go to meetings with them if you can, learn as much as you can about doing their job as is possible, because inevitably it's going to be more complicated than you think it is. I've worked with some really solid scientists in the past who has said, "Oh, well, if you just model it as a this and this sort of thing, then the graph is going to look something like this." And dang if it doesn't. But on the other hand, you're solving a simplified version of a problem or a toy version of a problem that is very different from, the problem that you're actually supposed to solve. Obviously, you want to have appropriate abstractions and things like that. But I mean, retail is very complicated. Supply chains are complicated. Accounting is complicated. Credit, as we know from our time in the banking industry, is
Yeah.
incredibly complicated. But ensuring that you're solving the right problem is the key to it. And being flexible as to what methodology you bring to bear is important as well. One of the things I recommend data scientists do, and I recommend business people who are working with data scientists do, is produce the artifact first. Some great advice I got years ago for giving data-driven presentations works really well here too, which is build the presentation first, figure out your outline, your story flow, things like that, before you've actually done the analytical work, and then work backwards from that. Because otherwise you can produce a whole bunch of figures and analyses and side analyses that don't actually fit into your main narrative. And this works well when you're giving an artifact to a business person. I need to give you the list of the top 10 product categories that are likely to do the following thing in the following quarter or something like that. Produce that artifact, then do your own mini UX testing. So people talk about, which is great, I think, data as a product, right? How do you
Yeah.
create a data set that is usable and well managed and well supported and versioned and all those good things that you can give to analysts downstream? I like to think about data science as a product too, right? Is what is this data science analysis doing in a downstream process? What is it plugging into? Ensure that it's going to be usable there. The same way in UX design, you do, Wizard of Oz tests and you do high fidelity mocks and all that kind of stuff. Do that with the data science report first so that you build the analysis that actually results in that thing.
You definitely caught my attention with Wizard of Oz test. Is that like clicking your heels together 3 times or following the yellow brick road?
It is, well, now we're getting a little bit out of my depth. It is essentially when you have a human pretending to be the piece of software.
Ah,
So
behind the curtain, I
you click
see.
a button and something changes, and it's not because the software changed it, it's because the experimenter manually changed it in order to it's basically how you test a new design before you've actually built out the software that implements it.
I got it. That makes sense. That makes sense. And data as a product, absolutely right. Whether it's analysts or product people or even the customers that are the ultimate consumers of what you're building, you want them to be able to use whatever you're providing them to make a decision, to inform a decision, to adjust a strategy, to change an approach to something. I was wondering before we came on all of the wonderful problems that you might seek to solve for the customers of Home Depot. I think there are some obvious ones in my mind about recommending the right products to them, making it as easy as possible for them to find what they're looking for. You mentioned logistics, which I hadn't thought of like making sure the right products are in the right place at the right time for the right people to buy. What are some of the other interesting work that your team does behind the scenes to kind of elevate the experience of the customers?
One of the reasons that I came to the Home Depot is because I am a lifelong DIYer and maker, and I was a weekly customer long before I was ever
Love
an
that.
employee, and it makes my job tremendously fun, and it also gives me incredible customer empathy. And one of the things that we do to build customer empathy is everybody spends time in the stores. I don't have them hanging up here, but sometimes I have my aprons hanging up here, and
Yeah.
I put on the orange apron and go in the store and help people find the things that they need several times a year. Um, because not every employee is a homeowner, is not a DIYer. Many are, like surprising number are, but not everybody is, right? And so the question is, how do you build that customer empathy? And it starts by getting people in the stores. And if you are somebody who's building product recommendation algorithms, I like to say the data people, we often live in a pretty abstracted and antiseptic kind of world, and there's something really nice about touching reality and getting your hands dirty. I like to joke. You mentioned Home Depot is one of the top 5 e-commerce. It is, and in many of the others, we have a slightly harder problem, I believe, because nobody is asking, "How do I use these sweatpants?" Right? But when you buy something at the Home Depot, um, it has to fit into whatever's going on in your home, whatever you're trying to attach it to, things like that. Do I have the right size thing to connect this thing to? Is it actually going to fit? Is it the right materials? Is it a strong enough material? If we're selling you screws, those screws need to hold a certain amount of weight and stuff like that. And so ensuring product compatibility is really important. Ensuring that, we're selling you the right thing for the job is really important. So recommendations for us is, a really interesting and really complex problem. A lot of it starts with customer behavior, right? So cliche, people who bought this also bought that, right? Like
Right.
that is a incredibly powerful signal of what people are going to end up wanting. But of course, there's a problem in recommender systems called the cold start problem. When a product is brand new and has never been purchased before, well,
By
how do you know
anybody.
what it goes with? And there's all sorts of things you can do to get around that. You can look at the attributes of that item and say, well, maybe it's going to perform like other things that have similar attributes. So, this is a widget. We've never sold this widget before, but we sell these other 10 widgets. So maybe this one is going to look sort of like that. And you can kind of bootstrap the process that way. Um, yeah. And we connect it directly to people's lived experiences, right? Like the algorithm almost doesn't matter to them. But again, people who bought this also bought that is a pretty clear indicator of why we are recommending this to you. Other things from this brand is a pretty clear statement about why we're recommending this to you. I have a product partner who's fond of saying you can't just show people stuff. You have to tell them why you're showing them that stuff. And I think that is really words that I live by.
Yeah, I like that ethos. I was thinking actually maybe I've got you and your team to thank for this. There's the house next door to me is no longer a house. It's now a large hole in the ground that's currently getting filled with concrete.
Oh,
And one of the offshoot outcomes from that is a prevalence of mice in and around my property. And I think the pest control guy said to me actually, this is normal. Like when ground gets disturbed at scale like this, then rodents will typically seek cover elsewhere. And that's been the case for me. So my wife and I, with um, somewhat of a grimace on our faces, went into the Home Depot last weekend in search of some mouse traps. And lo and behold, it was the first thing in front of us since we walked in. Like there was a display right there, and I assume at this time of year it's getting colder. So even if you're not having a house knocked down next to you, the rodents are also seeking cover. So I guess your team feeds into that sort of what's at the front. Because in July or in May, it's the grills, right?
Seasonality is incredibly important. And this is obvious if you think about it even for a couple of seconds, right? It's like, when do you want to stock shovels and snow blowers in your store? It's when it's right before snowing season. And when do you want to get that grass seed and weed control stocked? It's right before the beginning of the spring and stuff like that. So it turns out this is a very seasonal, cyclical business in that way. And yeah, meeting people at the right time is really important. And this varies geographically too, right? Even though I don't know exactly when it is, but say November might be when you want to start putting out the snow shovels. Well, maybe you want to do that up in Boston, but you don't want to do that down in Miami, right?
No, sure.
And so geography is really important. Yeah, all sorts of things that we take into consideration.
Yeah, well, it definitely felt like a blessing because I think I walk in the door and I think you can see the labels on all the aisles up and across. But I was walking and thinking, how am I going to find these tiny mouse traps in this huge store? So it felt like that felt like a real gift to me. Can we talk about AI machine learning?
Everybody wants to.
Everybody wants to. I imagine it's I know machine learning's been a part of data science for a while, and I'm sure AI is very much on the scene now. It's easy to you can read a lot about how inexact AI can be. So in ways that I might understand, have you begun to look at like using AI safely as part of a rigorous discipline such as data science?
I find AI to be a unhelpful name for this thing, and I think people have probably been thinking that for 60, 70 years, right? Um, there's a joke that whenever something in AI gets solved, they call it machine learning. And so AI is, only that subset of problems that hasn't been solved yet, which has actually changed in the past couple of years, right? Now, because I think AI has become it's a marketing term or
Yeah.
it is inexact in how it's used. And conventionally, what we need is these large language models, right? These models that are trained on large amounts of text from the internet. And people have snarkily criticized them as glorified autocomplete, right? Like basically it's just predicting the next word in your thing. And that's
Indeed, yeah.
that's a little bit unfair. I mean, methodologically, mathematically, like sure, there's something to that. And you can have all sorts of discussions about well, whether there's some emergent behaviors that make it be greater than the sum of its parts and stuff like that. I try not to get wrapped around that axle too much. What I try to do is focus on the extent to whether or not it's useful, right? Um, I think that LLMs are really good at summarization and
Hmm.
are really good at, obviously, you know, generation of text is it's where they can go haywire, right? And so the things that you read in the news about, you know, I fell in love with the AI and,
Yes.
left my spouse because my AI girlfriend was like better, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, she told
Like,
me to.
yeah, like that stuff's really off the rails. And there's some probably really interesting, like, other psychology conversations you can have about that. But like the generation part is where I think things uh, get a little riskier because of just how open ended it is. Summarization is a lot less risky because you're dealing inherently just with the information that you're providing to it.
You're
And
putting a fence
so,
around it, right?
yeah, exactly, exactly. And so I have found those use cases to be not just the safer ones, but the ones that just plain work better. I think any AI powered customer experience or even internal business process lives or dies based on the quality of the data. And one of the more prominent ones is Google's AI summaries, right? So now if you search for
Yeah.
something in Google, you get a little AI summary at the top. And as of right now, they're not great, right? Like I feel like they're very hit or miss.
Yeah, there's some interesting links they put in there, and the interesting thing about that for me as a student of Google's business value proposition is it actually really cannibalizes the huge business they have of people paying to be number one in the search results. It's a really interesting choice for me, and I'll watch with interest how that goes. But yeah, you're right. It's that summary can be a bit all over the place, and I- credit to them. There's typically diverse sources in there, but that can result in contradictions within the same summary. I've even
Exactly
seen
right, because
sometimes.
they're not using the most intelligent models that can do the backtracking and rewriting and things like that because they're trying to do it at scale. And I
And
imagine
at
this
speed as
all
well.
exactly this that's a really good point and segue that the speed and cost of these models, as it stands today at least, dictates where they will and will not be feasible, right? So if you are trying to integrate AI into, every page on a highly trafficked site or something like that, you've got to think about whether that's cost effective. You've got to think about whether that's going to be operating at the speed at which your user wants to operate. I mean, imagine every time you clicked on a link, you had to wait another 10 seconds for some text to get generated or something like that, right? So you have to think about whether it's appropriate or not appropriate for a given experience. And thinking about internal business processes for a second, businesses thrive on accountability and on it's the word I'm grasping for um, expectation, right?
Got it.
So, is something repeatable, uh, auditable, those kinds of things? If I, as an employee of some company, have an AI that I'm using to help me make some kind of decision, I, as an employee, still need to be responsible for or accountable for what comes out of that AI. I've joked that, there are these articles you can read online that says, in the future, you're going to have 10,000 AI coworkers, or, 10,000 AIs are going to, you're going to be the manager of 1,000 AIs. The problem is, I can't fire any of those AIs. I can't put those AIs on a performance plan or a coaching plan. Um, they're just software. So the human, ultimately, no matter how much AI you're using, some human ultimately needs to be responsible for a given decision. I still think human in the loop. Again, at least today, right? Things are changing so fast. Who knows where we'll end up even in the short term. But today, at least, I think human in the loop is incredibly important, right? Like using the AI to make the human do more, do better, do faster is great. But that human judgment we're not yet ready to replace that level of human judgment. Not because the judgment of the machine isn't that good, but because our organizations are not structured to imbue AIs with accountability.
Yeah, yeah, and the warning signs that point for that being the correct approach are everywhere, and you don't really need to look that far to see them. I I've answered questions from people before as a fellow data professional
Uh,
of this kind of mis expectation that people have that we're already in this position where you can take an entire enterprise data warehouse, here's all the data about the company, and just put some NLP interface on the front where any human can ask questions. And as I always say, how do you know what question to ask? Number one, and then are you going to trust that whatever model you're talking to understands the context and the rationale and the specifics of the question in the way that you intend them? And then when the answer comes back, how are you going to check that it's correct? Like there's so many issues that can go wrong, and great data governance, metadata, humans in the loop, using analysts and the power that they bring. And I always say, like when people ask if the data analysis job is under any threat, I always point back to that first point I made. It's like someone needs to know the right question to ask. And there's a whole bunch of skill, learning, and experience and expertise that goes into understanding the right question to ask before you even get to the, company defining insight that's gonna give you the record next quarter or whatever it might be. So very much behind the human in the loop on that. And beyond stock photography, I can't think yet of an industry that's completely been killed by AI. And I'm sure there's still some stock photographers going at it out there and adding some human uniqueness to what they do with it. What AI experiences have you come across, like, from in your life as a consumer, beyond your work at Home Depot? Are there any, including tools you may have used for any personal projects? Are there any standout experiences that you've had where the data is good, well fenced, well guarded? Or are there any shockingly bad ones? We talked about Google already, but are there any others that you've had?
Yeah. The two things that I use the most in my personal life are ChatGPT and Cursor.
Oh,
So
Cursor.
yeah, it is really fun to be able to use it for like side projects and, little things that I'm tinkering with here and there, for its code completion capabilities, for its ability to build, really a scaffold of a project. And that's another one where the hype cycle, you get very polarized opinions on AI powered coding. And I can speak only from personal experience here. I feel like it makes me 10 times more effective, right? I can spend an hour just, you know, thinking with a side project after the kids go to bed, and it's as though I did a 10-hour workday on it or something like that. Now, I have minimal, and that's even generous, web design skills, and my web design technology, keeping up to datedness stopped probably about 15 years ago. So I don't know React and I don't know, a bunch of the other modern web frameworks. I can read code. So if it generates code for me, I can read it and I can debug it and stuff like that. But I've been able to build, little side web. I built myself a flashcard app, right? Which I think basically everybody does. I have been about 150 days in of doing Chinese on Duolingo, which has been super fun.
Wow.
And I needed a way of just flashcarding myself of which characters I've learned. And I wrote a prompt, like a 2-paragraph prompt, gave it to Cursor. It built the front end, it built the back end, it imported my CSV of characters and built a little database backend to keep track of which things I got right and which things I got wrong and stuff like that. I mean, in 15 minutes, I was up and running with a little app, which was super cool. And I think what that's going to do is change what it means for like designers and product people and even engineers. Like, instead of mocking something up in, what are the different apps people use to make like high fidelity.
Oh yeah, the balsamic was one that I've seen before,
Yeah,
and
yeah, all those things, right? So
yeah.
the next generation of that, I'm sure, is gonna be, well, here's this clickable thing that actually does stuff. And, maybe it's not gonna be the prime time thing that you end up shipping with all the robustness and latency and security and all the things that you want actual software to have. But man, does it get you from an idea to something tangible really quickly. So that's been really fun. And then the others, I just use ChatGPT a lot. I was playing chess with my 10-year-old the other day, and we had a disagreement about whether a certain move was legal or not. And I took a picture of the board and I sent it to ChatGPT and is like, is the bishop allowed to take this piece under this circumstance? I forget exactly what it was. And it went through its reasoning steps and it's like, oh, you took a picture of the board this way. I need to rotate it horizontally. And then you're probably talking about this bishop and this piece. And it's like, no, you are not able to do this piece because even though it looks like you can move here, it turns out because this other guy is over here, you can't do it. And it resolved the argument. And it blew my mind because, well, the multimodalness of it, right? So there
Mhm.
was an image, there was some text. It had to look at the image, understand the image in the context of the text, and then figure out what to do. And it was amazing. And I've done this with, oh, one of the trees in my backyard had a weird growth on it. And I took a picture of it and I was like, what's wrong with my tree? And it said, oh, it looks like this is this kind of holly tree and it probably has this kind of disease. I did this on vacation once in the Caribbean as well, and I took a picture of a tree that I was like, "What kind of tree is this?" It said, well, based on the fact that you're located on such and such an island, because, grab the latitude, longitude off
It
of the
knew, yeah.
photo, it's probably this kind of tree, which is characterized by leaves that have these particular shapes on them. And I mean, it can be amazing, right? And when it's bad, right? Like, that's why I say these things kind of live or die based on the quality of the output. So, obviously, they're not as smart as, humans in the common sense, but the amount of knowledge that they can bring to bear is incredible. So, on the software engineering front, right, it's like sometimes you're handing a task off to the most junior developer in the world who knows absolutely nothing. Other times, it's like you're handing a task off to the most, seasoned old graybeard who knows everything, and sometimes it's somewhere in the
It's somewhere in the middle. Yeah, I've had a few similar experiences. Similarly, know how to code, don't know React. And I've had some fun personal projects where I'll have V0. I use generator front end, and then import the React code into Cursor. And the feature I love of Cursor is it'll tell you what the code is for. And I have the logical mind of a programmer, but if you don't know the language, it sometimes helps to see that construct and see it break down. The same with SQL. Could I write a two-page SQL query from scratch that was precise? No. But can I get halfway there and then say, finish this off, and then manually be the human in the loop and check the logic afterwards? Yes, I can also do that. So I find it incredibly powerful for those instances. And then with your picture thing, my wife and I were in Indiana in August, and there were a lot of fields. And it seemed to be just two types of crop. One of them was corn. That was easy. Like everyone knows what corn looks
I know
like.
what corn is.
It was a dangling off the other one. But then there was this other one, and it maybe was like 2 feet tall, very sort of neat dark green leaves, fields and fields and fields of it. And we had no idea. And we even went up to the plants and we couldn't quite work it out. GPT knew exactly same thing, like it knew where we were. And well, babes, you're in Indiana. There's only two real crops that are growing around there: corn and soybeans. There were acres and acres of soybeans. I never knew Indiana had a soybean thing going on. But I want to pick up on the point you made about sometimes it's a junior developer, sometimes it's a kind of, it can be a master developer, and some of that integration work that you talked about in terms of building a database, linking the back end to the front end. That's where I find most people fall down with their AI personal projects who can't code. Like sticking it all together and getting the database to understand what's happening on the front end is tricky still for some of today's apps. But I think it's safe to say that most junior development tasks, it's easy to do. So I worry it creates a supply issue. I still see like wizened integration engineers and experienced software engineers in super high demand. But it worries me a bit that the more organizations use AI or are able to use AI for junior software engineering tasks, the less opportunity it creates for junior software engineers, who of course become the future senior software engineers. So again, just a personal hypothesis, and I've not seen any of it play out, but I wonder what happens in the future. My hope is that everyone becomes more kind of multi-skilled generalist, and more valuable. I don't know. Any thoughts?
I don't know that everyone being more generalist is the way I would quite put it. So, I do completely agree with the dynamics of the situation that you're describing, right? And just from what I've read in the news, right, is demand for junior engineers, entry level people is down, while demand for senior people remains high. Yes, the industry is eating its seed corn, right? So if you don't grow the experts of the future, then there won't be any, right? And if you take away the junior opportunities today, yeah, you're keeping people from getting into that path to be the experts in the future. So I worry that we're high on a artificially large supply of engineers right now. That won't be the case in the future.
Depending on the day, I might go glass half full on it and instead say, actually basic software engineering just became more accessible to way more people than it ever was before, and it's less technical a procedure to take. Like, you don't have to start from a command line anymore, like I used to back in college. So it feels instantly more accessible. So maybe the doors are
I think every generation feels that way, though, right? I think that the people who were writing in C when they were young were made fun of because they weren't writing in machine code, and the people who were writing Java in the 90s and 2000s were being made fun of because they weren't writing in C++, right? It's like
yeah.
whoever was at the level of abstraction just before you is going to criticize you for being at a greater level of abstraction.
The one thing is, going back to your point about making things real, and I think about this from a product perspective. A paper prototype is all well and good, but if you can put together a functional or seemingly functional front end, even if there's no back end behind it, it's easier to sort of test products with users than it ever has been before. But that, coupled with the large language models focus on words and repeatable patterns and predicting, one of the things I've seen people train LLMs really effectively on is marketing, sales and marketing. And I've certainly observed in the world of like Y Combinator SaaS platform type areas, the people have become on average a lot better at sales and marketing, but on average not a lot better at delivery of value and focus on solving the problems that actually matter. It'll be an interesting one to see how that evolves. And of course, it's a different type of data, but you still need data to back up a hypothesis that a product is worth having. And now, certainly my experience is we're flooded with many products out there. Back to your original point about how you operate. If you're not connected to the humans who have a need or the business that is trying to drive value, it's now possible to create a product very quickly that's of no use whatsoever to anybody. But
And recall that these LLMs, the L is for second L at least, is for language, right? These things are designed to manipulate words, not numbers. And so I've heard some very seasoned data scientists and statisticians point out that your optimization models, your forecasting models, these things are still very much in need of expert statisticians building them, right? Like anything that involves, um, yeah, uh, numbers is just something that LLMs, by their very nature, are not going to be good at.
yeah, I see, and I know in a large enterprise, this nightmare will never come to fruition. But I see the nightmare flying around out there of CEOs saying, "Oh, forget the data. Let's get AI in. AI will make smart, intelligent guesses, even if my data quality is really bad. AI will fix it." I shudder at some of the potential mishaps that will come off of the back of that. So it all goes back to what you're talking about in terms of
I will use a very appropriately home improvement related metaphor for that. Your home is built on a foundation. And if you have cracks in your foundation, there is nothing that you can do to shore up the structure that will paper over or gloss over the underlying foundation problems, right? So, um, data governance, data management are as essential as ever. That is the foundation on which your data ecosystem is built. Your data will never be useful for AI if it's not just useful as data. And so all those fundamentals of ensuring your data is well cataloged and well organized and well governed all apply just as much as they ever did, and probably more so.
yeah, there should be the golden period for data governance, and I'm not sure the whole world has quite cottoned onto that yet. And maybe there's a few failed AI projects that need to happen out there before we all get there. But absolutely the solidity of those foundations, suitably on my behalf as well, seeing as there's literal foundations being poured next door to me right now, at the expense of the mice. Will have to be spot on and correct, otherwise the house will always be shaking. All right, Scott. Thanks so much for coming on. I've known each other for a long time. I always enjoy chatting with you about all of the latest advancements, and I'm sure Home Depot is very lucky to have you and the amazing team that I'm sure you're building there. And thanks again for providing great service to all the customers, including me, who go in, even if I'm only a part-time DIYist. I think my wife would certainly love me to spend more time with you all. But
Well, I'm always
uh,
happy to help you find the mousetraps.
yeah, indeed.
But this was really fun. Thank you so much for having me on. It is always great to see you. And yeah, this is a really, really nice time.
Cool. Take care, Scott. I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks for tuning in to Transformed with Data. If today's conversation gave you even one insight, one aha moment, or one new idea to take action on, do me a favor. Subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone who's ready to level up. Until next time, keep asking the right questions, keep challenging the status quo, and keep transforming with data.